Good afternoon and welcome to the first lecture in the game mode section of the course. So this will just be a very brief overview of what the game mode is, how we'll be using them, and the general concepts behind them. So as I've done in the past, I'll just very quickly make a quick comparison for any people who have programmed in the past or have done game development in a different engine. The game mode will be a lot like a game controller or a game manager script that you'd put into the project to manage and control the functionality and the global aspects of the game, things that other scripts or blueprints might need to know. And then for those people who haven't, and then for anybody who hasn't done game development before or perhaps hasn't used another game engine or programmed before, what this means is that things like the pickups that we'll be adding to the game will be keeping score of the amount of coins that we collect. And the game manager, or in this case the game mode, is perfect for keeping count of those, saving them, loading them, and storing that, because it's something that will always be needed in the game every time you load it. So we can store all of that in one place. And then things like the coin blueprints can just call functions within the game mode and update that as and when needed. Now, it also extends slightly further in Unreal and how they're used. So to demonstrate what a game mode is, if we go to the project settings, and if we go back to the maps and modes, so we're probably getting quite familiar with this section of the project settings now. This is where in the past we've set our level, and I've just noticed mine has deselected itself. So our main map will be the map called main that we made, and this will load by default to recap what that's doing. And then the game mode we can see down here has a default game mode. So we need a game mode of some sort in the project for it to function. So if we haven't made one and specified one, then we get the default game mode. And we know this is the default game mode because down here we can see everything's grayed out and we cannot change what is being called. And this is how I mean that it controls a lot of the functionality we'll be using in the project. So the game mode is spawning the default pawn class, so the pawn class will be what the player is controlling. It's also controlling the default HUD class, the player controllers, and other things that we may not be looking at in this project. So to demonstrate what the default pawn class is, if we go back to the main window, we can see at the moment there is no pawn or character in the level. We just have what will be representing our character later, which is the ship. If we press play though, and then press F8, which will unpossess the player controller, which gives us the option to then fly around and move around as though we were building the level. We can go over here to the world outliner and we can see that we now have the default pawn, and this was spawned by the game mode, and we expected that because it says here default pawn. And then if we select that and press F, that will zoom in on what the default pawn is, and the default pawn is simply an untextured sphere, and this is our representation in the world. So if we possess, that will disappear because we are now that grey sphere, and that's what we're moving around as, so we won't be able to see it again. So I'll just eject a second time. And it's also included things like a default camera and the camera actor and some other things. So all of this is being generated through the game mode. So what we'll be doing is we're going to create our own game mode, and we're going to replace these things with the things that we want to run in our project, such as making this ship the player's default pawn rather than the grey sphere, adding in our own camera and things like that. So that is a kind of high level overview of the concept of the game mode. So again, I try not to talk too much without doing anything, so I'll leave that here for this lecture, and then in the next we'll start creating one, and hopefully we can see a little bit more of how these are implemented in the game. So I'll leave that there for now, and I will see you in the next lecture.